The guys are ready, so let's hand over to Rob Rose, JB, PB and Aldrin, and get on with the show.
Welcome to the
Club Dub Football Podcast,
where the only question is,
does your team make it into the club?
Can he get in? No, he cannot!
Welcome back, gents.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, Rob.
It's not quite the final show of our season, but it feels like the final show proper of our year, because the next time we will be talking about live, meaningful football is nearly 8 months away in week one. Just let that sink in momentarily. But let's bask in the glory of a thoroughly entertaining Super Bowl between the Rams and the Bengals. And rather than give it any greater build-up, let's start throwing it around our virtual room and see what your thoughts were. So big takeaway before we break it down into anything more specific from Super Bowl LVI. And Aldrin, I'm going to kick off with you.
Ooh, so you want one particular takeaway? I think probably the fact that in clutch moments, Aaron Donald is the guy that you want to be making a big play. I think that's it, really. He was just phenomenal, wasn't he? An absolute behemoth in that second half, and he was almost unstoppable. First half, that pass rush just didn't really come to life, and you kind of saw Burrow with a bit of success, but the game plan that they came out with for the second half to get Donald free from being doubled up with the center, was just absolutely phenomenal. And I think we were all together. We all knew that final play was going to be a Donald moment. It felt like there was something coming, and lo and behold, it was him that made the play.
Aaron Donald, cometh the hour, cometh the man. And I mean, almost frustrating that it's what so many pundits predicted, isn't it? You know, Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, absolutely were difference makers. But as much as Cooper Kupp is MVP, I think this puts an exclamation point on a career for Aaron Donald. Even if he goes on from here, maybe gets further Super Bowls, I think it absolutely cements him as a first ballot Hall of Famer whenever that might roll around, and truly one of the greatest ever to play the game. So Donald is your takeaway. JB, before we get onto the nonsense of how long it takes to sing a national anthem from Phil, what was your big takeaway from Super Bowl Sunday?
I mean, you've kind of just spoiled it there, because mine was obviously going to be what a national anthem that was. Hey, lads, like the timing on it, my friends, was perfect. I kind of agree with Aldrin. I think it was a little bit of just looking at big players delivering in big moments, like, Cooper Kupp having such an amazing season as a wide receiver and coming through at the very end. Aaron Donald providing the big play when he needed to. Was he lined up in the neutral zone? Yes, a little bit. Does that matter?
Stop ruining people's fun. Get alive.
But no, because where I'm going with it was Donald lined up in the neutral zone? Yes. Does that matter? No, because, okay, we take that off. Let's also take off the Bengals touchdown at the beginning of the half, because that should have been flagged as well. So you can't argue those things. I think for me, it's just nice. It was a nice time. I had a really lovely time watching it with all of you, and of course, Club Dub Football Podcast halftime analyst and super fan Nick to be with us to provide analysis on the halftime show. # Nick Likes Rap. And just it was nice watching Aaron Donald get a ring. It was nice watching Cooper Kupp get a ring. It was nice watching Matthew Stafford get a ring, and sitting here with you gentlemen, happy and content in the knowledge that I told you all, especially you, Rob Rose, that Matthew Stafford was the far superior quarterback to Jared Goff. The Rams had absolutely made the right choice, and I was right.
I mean, you also said that the Bengals were going to win, so, swings and roundabouts. Don't win them all.
I was only going to say, JB, you are somewhat picking your poison there and being slightly narrow in which of your predictions came true. But if we're talking of predictions coming true, Phil, who could have predicted the length of time it took for Sunday's national anthem to be sung other than you? And a good deal richer for it.
never been so emotionally invested in a national anthem in my life, as you can all attest to. But yes, she hit the over on the national anthem. Fantastic. Quids in. Thanks to Jack, who sent me that tip. Absolutely amazing. I think probably a lot of people could have guessed, considering that it got taken down by US bookmakers. That one got taken down, and by UK bookmakers by the time of the game. So I hope everybody listening managed to get a little bit on and celebrate that. James mentioned the halftime show, absolutely fantastic. I loved the weekend last year. I think it was another stellar show this year, you know, a real good kind of throwback to 20 years ago, to some of our younger days. And they played all the hits, which is the main thing, you know, all killer, no filler, as we like to say. I thought that was really good. And the game itself, I think, was the first half was pretty good. You know, it looked like it was going to catch fire at the start of the second half with that second Higgins touchdown. And then it kind of petered out a bit. I think they were, you know, the coordinators, certainly the offense of the Bengals, maybe was too scared to make a play because they were ahead, and you know, I suppose they didn't want to risk the lead and risk losing the game with an interception or a dumb play or something. And ultimately, I think they probably went a bit too cautious, then couldn't get anything going. That gave the Rams defense confidence. And obviously, you know, we saw what happened. I mean, trying to run it on third down and fourth down with the game on the line, for me, was a mistake. But then, you know, maybe they were trying to catch the Rams out because the Rams would think they were going to throw it and would get through. You know, it seems like a strange decision that he tried running it with P. Ryan rather than putting Mixon in the game, who we talked about, you know, on the pre-show as one of the best running backs in the league. But again, maybe that's to throw him off. You know, P. Ryan's pass blocking was maybe better, so they throw him off thinking it's a pass play, and then he goes and runs it. So it kind of, the first half was great. It built up to being, you know, we were needing 3 points to tie it with 1:20 left or whatever it was on the clock. You know, we're going to get that grandstand finish of Evan McPherson nailing a 50 something yarder through the middle of the post to take it to overtime. And my overriding emotion is that we were robbed of that, you know, at the end of the game, ultimately by a great defensive play from arguably one of the best defensive players in the game. So there we are. But a good Super Bowl, I think. You know, on balance, I think it was a good game. It was an enjoyable game to watch as a neutral, semi-neutral, I suppose. Yeah, much better than Carolina, Denver, for example.
Semi-neutral after the anthem. Obviously, before that, could have had it.
Yeah. So Phil, go on, give us the detail, because we've kind of danced around this. What was it you bet on? You've mentioned it was an over-under. So what were the terms of this bet you won on Sunday?
So it was, for me to win, the anthem needed to be over 102.5 seconds. Obviously, the under was under 102.5 seconds. And since placing the bet, every article I read talked about how quickly she sings the anthem. Her nickname was Quickie Mickey.
If it wasn't before, it is now. Nicely coined.
I instantly regretted it. And she started off quick, but then the choir got involved, and, you know, the rest is history. She repeated a line as well. I think I listened to it back a couple of times on Monday. Why not? She repeated a line, you know, and held those kind of last couple of notes on the last verse. So thank you, Mickey Guyton, for doing that.
Well, I'm thrilled you won your bet. For we all are. It could have spoilt our night together, most definitely. And for me, I mean, actually, you know, you'll probably say I stole your thunder mentioning the anthem of the bet too early. My takeaways were very similar to yours, actually, Phil. You used a word in your summation, which was balance. And I actually think balance was all that made this game entertaining, because I don't think either team really played up to their potential. I mean, the Rams, particularly the run game, I mean, 40 yards out of the run game with all the attempts they had on Sunday felt really, really insignificant, and left an awful lot for the passing game of the Rams to do. A passing game minus Odell after, a quarter of play as well. So it was the fact it was so close that led to it being so entertaining. But I'm going to go with you, Phil. I think probably the big moment for me of the Super Bowl was that halftime show. I think it will be talked about in generations, you know, the way that people, you know, talk back to, I suppose, McCartney's one that comes up quite a bit. You know, The Who in Miami was always a big one for me. But I think that is going to be a halftime show that is talked about for decades and generations. And I think, considering the headliners, considering what it meant to have those people, that style of music finally reflected on a stage like the NFL halftime show. I thought they absolutely did a stunning job. It's not really my type of music. It's not something I follow, but even I felt it was, seismic and important watching it. One of the more entertaining Pepsi halftime shows of my lifetime. And great job done all round there. So let's now get into the meat of the Super Bowl. And I want to start by talking about the point that you ended on there, Phil. Did the Rams win it? Or without wanting to sound overly cruel, did the Bengals lose it? Because you made a really interesting point. They come out of the second half and put up a touchdown and field goal very quickly. They then end with a fourth quarter where the Bengals don't put a single point on the board, end up losing the game by 3, not troubling the scoreboard at all in the fourth quarter. So did the Rams turn up the heat, or did the Bengals just not do enough with the game and the possibility to lift the Lombardi in their grasp? Should we go around in the same order? Aldrin, what do you think?
On JB, you've got your hand up. Go for it.
Well, so to my mind, and kind of been talking to some people because I went into the office today about it. My thoughts kind of align with what Rob's takeaway was at the end there in terms of it being a balance. That game to me wasn't the bombs away points fest that I think some people, I think us in particular, were expecting. And it felt a lot more like one of those really nice chess games where ultimately the winner was decided by the team that adjusted to the opposition and didn't let that opposition adjust to them. We saw at halftime, the Bengals came out and got that massive touchdown to T. Higgins, which kind of turned the game. And the Bengals looked like they were on top for a while. And then the Rams came back again. And I think Chris Collinsworth especially was talking about it on the broadcast, the NBC broadcast that we were listening to, about how throughout the first half, the Bengals had been able to use their center as an additional blocker for Aaron Donald because no one was lined up on him. So that way they could double Donald and stop him wrecking it. So the Rams in the second half, after giving up those touchdowns, were like, right, put someone on the center. The center's now got to engage with someone immediately. Donald is now free, or not free, but he's got less to contend with. And the Bengals never really seemed to find a way out of that. And that, I think, summarized it. I don't think it was that the Bengals necessarily gave it away or that the Rams were anything like this like conquering titan. I think it was literally just making adjustments. And ultimately this time, Sean McVay and Raheem Morris and the rest of the Rams coaching staff got the edge. But if we played that game 100 times, there's a good case for it being 50-50 as to who would come out and win.
Yeah, I think I see it. I think, I hate to agree, JB, because I know I've been belittled and ridiculed for making this point of how much an upgrade was Matt Stafford over Jared Goff. But there was the point where Stafford finds Cooper Kupp ultimately for the game-winning score. It was just so reminiscent of that drive where Jared Goff ends up floating that ball, over receivers in the end zone in their previous Super Bowl appearance under McVay. And you kind of thought, actually, he did get it done. Because when a running game is not helping you at all, and I mean, I don't think Van Jefferson's a bad receiver, but I do think we saw a little bit of a drop-off in terms of their potency when they lost Odell Beckham, who had started, he'd looked quite sprightly for the few plays he was involved in the game. I think when the opposition knows what you're going to do and you're still able to do it, everybody knows Cooper Kupp is going to be the focal point of that offense moving down the field for that drive and to basically move what was it 75, 80 yards down the field in the fourth quarter of a Super Bowl and do what they did, I thought was really impressive. Coaching, but also players. Sean McVay talked about it afterwards, didn't he? That situational aspect of, big players have got to do big things in big moments of big games. And you kind of saw everything that they worked for just come to fruition in that, 3.5, 4 minute drive.
Yeah, and I would totally echo that adjustment point that you made, because not only did they adjust on defense, and they came up with a plan to get to Joe Burrow more frequently, and ultimately the Bengals didn't adapt to that. But ultimately, also, I don't ever think the Bengals were going to be capable of adapting to that. You know, we came into this game knowing that their biggest weakness and the area they were going to get exposed was that offensive line. You know, it was a complete mismatch. And in actual truth, they did a brilliant job in the first half to keep it to what it was. I thought they got some success on the ground, and that opened things up for Joey Burrow. So I think they overperformed in the first half and then got found out in the second. And they weren't going to be able to adjust. But I think as well, the adjustment that the Rams made on offense was critical, because they went and did what good teams have done a lot this year and just trusted their playmakers to make big plays. You know, I'm thinking that that 4th and 1 sweep where they just got the ball in Cooper Kupp's hands and let him make the play. You know, just go and make the play, get the yard and get us the first down. And I thought those moments were really telling because, like you say, everybody knew that Cooper Kupp was the guy. You know, he was the guy. And still, they managed to find him. I think that Matt Stafford no-look pass down the middle to Cooper Kupp where they just make a little bit of space and he throws into such a narrow window, and it was all part of that critical drive where they marched down the field and ultimately got the touchdown. And I guess the other thing really was just the underperformance of Jalen Ramsey. And we touched on it a bit last week and said it's going to be critical how Ramsey plays, because if he can nullify Chase, then the Bengals have got no hope. But if he gets beat like he was beaten by Mike Evans and a few others in the playoffs, then it could be game on. And I think that's exactly what we saw. Now, I know that Higgins touchdown probably could have got called back for a face mask, but ultimately he was pretty roundly beaten in a lot of points in the game. I think I saw a stat that he gave up the most yards he's ever given up in a game. And ultimately, you know, there was a couple of big plays on him, but he didn't seem quite the same force. But he did make a few crucial plays. And I think when I was talking about, you know, those big players stepping up in big moments, you think of Ramsey down towards the goal line when the Bengals were kind of marching and could have got another touchdown, and they kept them out of the end zone. Things like that were just critical. But yeah, I think there was just so many interesting matchups. It might not have been super splashy all of the time, but so many really close matchups defined by single moments of brilliance from certain players. It was kind of my big thing.
So have the Bengals missed a trick from a coaching standpoint then? Because if I take your point, Aldrin, the biggest players in those big moments, you know, we talk Donald, we talk Kupp, we talk Stafford. 4th and 1, little over a minute left. You're driving down the field needing a field goal to tie. And you mentioned this, JB. They're 4th and 1, and they've got Joe Mixon sitting on the sideline. You know, is that... Phil made the point, you know, are they trying to trick the Rams into thinking they might be passing rather than running and so on? But is that a coaching error? Did it come down to missteps? Is this all the brilliance of... I mean, one of the things I'm amazed at, and you make a fair point, Donald, in a weird kind of way, when we talk about Donald being a wrecking ball, what he does is he takes away the deep threat. You know, he takes away the time receivers need to get down the field for Burrow to make these, you know, these huge kind of Mahomes like 40 to 60 yard plays. But actually, you know, what was the... You talked about them not making adjustments when the Rams did. I mean, does any of this fall at the Bengals' feet, do we think? I mean, I don't want to say they choked. I mean, it's hard to feel down on the Bengals at all. They've massively overperformed this season. But did they all go to sleep on Sunday night wishing they had a couple of plays back?
I don't think it's just the Bengals. I'm not even sure the Rams particularly won because they were well coached, because of coaching decisions, if that makes sense. Like, I think the game was decided by some big individual plays. You know, you think of Donald swallowing up that 4th down, and, you know, Cooper Kupp's individual brilliance and what a season he's had. I think, I can't remember the way around. The only person who's ever won most yards, most touchdowns, maybe most completions, and a Super Bowl MVP as well. The only receiver who's done that is Jerry Rice.
In a career.
And he did it in a career. Cooper Kupp's done it in a season. You know, it's remarkable from a guy who wasn't even rated 1 star when he was, you know, coming out of high school or college or whichever it was. What a career. You know, he's kind of come from nowhere. But I think it was those moments of brilliance or mistakes. You know, I mean, Eli Apple, it's all well and good running your mouth and you know, cussing down fan bases of teams you've played for before and how good you are to be in the Super Bowl, but you've then actually got to show up and not just kind of give up plays all the time. But I think it was those individual moments of brilliance rather than coaches scheming players open. And, you know, if I think of Belichick, whenever they'd get to the Super Bowl, you know, it was always his game planning and his defense that bamboozled people. You know, if I think of last year's Super Bowl, it was Todd Bowles and blitzing Mahomes so much and you know, it was his scheming that played such a big part.
Who was in last year's Super? I can't remember. Remind me, last year's Super Bowl.
I think it was when the Bucks beat the Chiefs.
The Bucks. It's funny you bring that up, Phil. It's
not mentioned that for 20 minutes.
Super Bowl and the Bucks is going to be a long distant memory now.
And yeah, but I think it was just individual plays. I can't think of, you know, any particular coaching brilliance that came out of the weekend, if that makes sense.
But I think you are right.
I think the Bengals will wake up regretful. But I think Zach Taylor's been open and honest with that. You know, I think he said what his thinking was at the time. It was his call. Ultimately, it didn't work. But, you know, that's your role as a coach, isn't it? You've got to have the balls to make the big decisions, and ultimately,
I do think that coaching adjustment they made to make sure Aaron Donald was more free in the second half was crucial, though. That's the only reason they won that Super Bowl, is maintaining pressure.
That's true. That is a fair point.
If I can, I also just kind of want to throw out something that in true Club Dub podcast tradition, we've almost got through what we're talking about without mentioning something major. And it's not players' names this time. It is kind of the fact that the Rams did have to change what I'm sure was their entire offensive game plan when their number 2 went down with what is going to be quite a serious knee injury. Like you saw what Kupp was able to do at the end there, but you have to think that if they had Odell Beckham Jr. on the field for a heck of a lot longer than they did, we'd be talking about a very different performance from Cooper Kupp. And
they were already without Woods and Higbee, weren't they?
Yeah. What a shame for OBJ
two
as
the
well.
biggest time.
I mean, like him or loathe him, people thought he was washed and, you know, he was never going to get back to that great form. And ultimately, since he joined the Rams, he's really shown himself to be a top-level receiver. You know, probably going to make a case for another contract, either with the Rams, you know, a decent contract with the Rams or somewhere else. And he blows out his knee again in a, you know, totally innocuous, you know, non-contact injury. What a shame.
I hate to say it, though, but I think from what I saw of OBJ on Sunday, he'll take that injury and a Super Bowl win. You know, I think the fact that he's on that roster and made a big play
100%.
and comes away with a ring, I think 9 months out, he's already shown that he's 100% still got it in the right offense. So I think he'll be okay.
Do you know, there's a really good point you make there, Roger, about we talked through the year about the Rams were very much all or nothing. You know, you saw the kind of changes they had with personnel, the Von Miller. I mean, actually Miller and Odell Beckham probably aren't as big to me an indicator of how much they will win now as probably the Eric Weddle acquisition. You know, you're bringing a guy in who's been effectively, I'm sure not quite sat at home doing nothing, but certainly not been playing competitive football for a couple of years. And I mean, I like the thinking. Safety, I think, is a position you play more with your brain than necessarily your foot speed or any particular physical attribute. But they were as win now as I think I can ever remember. And it paid off. You know, Beckham, Von Miller, Weddle certainly, they're going to the Rams to win a Super Bowl, right? I mean, Eric Weddle's not coming out of retirement for anything but. You know, he doesn't need a playoff appearance to add to that career resume.
And he tore his pec as well, like 8th player of the game, still played the rest of the game, you know, calling all the plays. And then he skips out on the Super Bowl parade yesterday because he's not seen, you know, he's gone home because he's not seen his kids in weeks. Like, what a guy. What a great guy.
I mean, it's a remarkable story and a remarkable approach. I mean, we've talked probably going into this season about how the NFL is a very copycat league. And we've seen a lot of people follow kind of the Les Snead kind of format of who needs draft capital when you can go and trade for, the real deal, these ready-made players that are out there and available from other teams. And you've got to think now they have proved this concept to be, devastating. They have now got the Super Bowl that they were aiming for. You wonder how many people will do the same. There is an element of, and, Whitworth and Donald and even McVay, there are these stories about who will retire. They're massively over the cap for next year. But does it matter? That was always the question, wasn't it, to things like Giants fans? Do you mind the years of mediocrity if on 2 occasions Eli Manning rolls up against the Patriots and delivers you a Super Bowl win? Even if they do have a real drop-off from here for the next few seasons, and it's certainly not guaranteed, I think if McVay stays alone, they'll remain competitive. But you take that, don't you? Like you say, James, Eric Weddle's got the rest of his life to recover from that injury. Odell Beckham's got an entire off-season to rehab. They got there and they got it done. That's got to be, that's absolutely everything to those players in the latter stages of their career.
Well, we talked a little bit about it when we were kind of discussing the, is this retirement for McVay? Is this retirement for Donald? And you were kind of, for any Formula One fans listening, we sort of equated it to James Hunt or Nico Rosberg, or to put it into a more an NFL example, a guy who's going into the Hall of Fame, like Dick Vermeil, won a Super Bowl with the Rams and walked away from the Rams. It's like, well, I've won a Super Bowl now. And you get into that kind of, yes, you have to have an ultimately competitive mindset to be successful in these kinds of sports. But there comes a point where it's like, well, what's your boundary? What's your barrier? What's the point that you're trying to get to? And I kind of did a little bit of looking into Aaron Donald in comparison to the other greats. There are 3 people who have won the Defensive Player of the Year award 3 times. J.J. Watt, Lawrence Taylor, and Aaron Donald. And 2 out of those 3 have Super Bowl rings. And you kind of got to look and think, well, until the weekend, Donald wasn't one of those 2. So would the edge in who's the greatest defensive player of all time kind of go to Taylor because he's won the 3, he's got a ring as well. Now they're on that kind of even keel in those kind of stats. And you're thinking, okay, well, does Aaron Donald need to do this? Like, how many times do you need to go out and be one of, if not the best players on the field every single time before you kind of look and think, yeah, just this is fun, but I don't need to do this. Like, and obviously, as surprising as this is going to be to everybody, I'm not friends with Aaron Donald. I don't know him particularly well, so I have no idea what his actual mindset is, but they're the kind of questions that you ask. There is also a little bit, like Rob said, in terms of the state the Rams are going to be in. And we've talked cap issues before on this podcast when we've talked about like the Packers and Aaron Rodgers and things like that. Sean McVay's got back to the Super Bowl now. He's won the Super Bowl, erasing the mistakes of the previous time against the Patriots. Still didn't look particularly great while doing it. Yes, I think the Rams adjusted to what the Bengals were doing well, but they still didn't seem like they were the Rams that we've seen previously. So does McVay think, okay, we'll try and do what the Bucs did. We'll try and bring everybody back somehow and go and do it all again? Or does he look and think, right, youngest coach ever to win the Super Bowl, was youngest head coach ever when I was hired. Yeah, I could just go and sit on a beach for a couple of years, just have my feet up.
The point, I mean, there's obviously a lot about Donald and Whitworth, but the point that really stood out to me with McVay is they talked about the level of sacrifice he makes to be as good a head coach as he is. They talk about the hours he puts in. And I can't remember who in the coverage made the point that, this is a young man who, is, maybe looking to start a family, maybe looking at a phase of his life where he does media work. And you look at, the Romos of this world. I mean, ultimately, they live a very good life and stay very close to the game they love without the 20-hour days, And I don't know. in the week leading up to the Super Bowl, I didn't like it. I felt it was a bit saccharine, a bit sugar-coated, and I just didn't buy it. And do you know what? Now with the other side of it, I'm not as convinced. I don't think I would be as amazed if
I think after the parade, I'm less expecting it to happen now, because they, like McVay and Donald, both talked about running it back and all that stuff. And McVay's fiance put on Instagram that he's not retiring and all that kind of stuff. So beforehand, I thought, it could happen. I'm less inclined to believe that now. But also, I think you've got to look at it from the angle that if McVay was to retire, then or leave the Rams, you've got to look at it from the point that he's won the Super Bowl with them, sold the farm, by giving up all the draft picks and stuff in win now mode, and then left it for somebody else to deal with. He's not wanted to then, prove that he can do it by rebuilding afterwards. So I think that's almost a knock at him if he was to kind of walk away from it.
Well, so this is a worth it. And sorry, I know Aldrin's been sort of chomping at the bit to get in, and we're kind of not letting him. So we will let him speak at a point. But the kind of thing I just want to say in terms of like people saying one thing and changing another, like we're only a few weeks removed from a beloved quarterback idolized by a member of this podcast saying, word coming out that he was going to retire, and then word coming out that he wasn't, and then a day or so later officially he'd retired. So
now they're talking about him not retiring. Like,
yeah, like,
Tom.
So like I don't want to say that you couldn't trust the word of these people that like the paper's written on, but we'll have to see what happens, because I mean they could change their mind every hour for all we know.
I just can't see it for either of them. I think Whitworth is going to retire. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. The guy's 40. He's struggled through a few injuries the last couple of years, and a lot of that kind of talk seems like he's more leaning towards retirement. Donald and McVay, I just don't see it. I don't see why Donald would retire at the peak of his powers, purely because it's not like he's struggling. It's not like he's got a load of injuries. He's been pretty healthy all season, an absolute dominant wrecking ball. I just don't see why he would want to walk away at this point. McVay, equally, I think even with all the cap trouble, you would still think that team's going to be competitive under his leadership and with some of those key pieces still in and around. I just don't see it.
So to quantify the cap issue, I mean, Phil, you said, it's not quite the selling the farm. They're not the Saints. So, I mean, they're scheduled at the moment to be $14 million over.
Yeah,
and obviously they've got a number of free agents that they would need to re-sign that would put them further. But I mean, they're not. I mean, what are the Saints are slated to be something like 50 million over? I mean, some teams
55, 56.
Some teams are absolutely in an abysmal state. The Rams aren't as bad as many, but equally, the point you made, JB, they're not in a Bucks style position where they can even think about bringing everybody back. That just doesn't factor into it. But if you take out, I don't know, the thing that separates the Rams now is they've got a quarterback, wide receiver. Running back doesn't feel as much of a problem. I don't think their running backs are bad, but there are players available each and every year. Leonard Fournette obviously came in for the Bucks a season ago. There are players out there at running back if you want to get better that you could go out and get.
For $1 million a year.
For like $5 million, you can probably, you'd need a bit of luck and you'd need a guy to, hit the ground running literally as well as metaphorically. But that isn't an impossible scenario. Do you know what? I mean, a 40-year-old guy just put a ring on his finger. How much would they miss? Whitworth would be expensive to replace, wouldn't he? I mean, when you're looking at players in that kind of, real top tier protecting offensive linemen.
He didn't play every playoff game, did he? I think because of injury. I'm sure against the Bucks, they had their backup left tackle in. I can't remember if it was against the Bucks or if it was the conference championship. But he stood in and did a good enough job. So I'm not saying he'll be the same level as Whitworth, but they may not be in a rush to go.
I think as well, this draft class, like I know we're going to talk for the next 8 months about the draft class, but this draft class is heavy in offensive tackles and offensive linemen, they're not going to get the best one because they ain't picking anywhere high, but you can still get good players that can do a job. Players like Whitworth, I think if you went to replace him identically, he's really expensive, but then they're not going to do that. There's lots knocking about though.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams, you talked about cap issues. It feels like they haven't got a draft pick for the next 4 years, does it? So, they really have given away a lot of draft capital, but you make a good point. It's not like a team that needs a quarterback. There aren't that many of those, I suppose.
I think as well that the unique position they're in now is the same position that the Bucks were in 2 years ago when Brady first joined. They're a desirable team to go and take a cheap deal on. Fournette foregoes a lot more money elsewhere to go and play on basically a minimum salary for the Bucks because he wants to win and succeed. And I think if McVay stays and Donald stays, the Rams are squarely in that spot where, you know what, I might take a veteran minimum deal because I'm in with a shot of a ring. You
can imagine Odell Beckham doing that, couldn't you? It feels like
he said that already, hasn't he? He said he'll take a cut price deal in order to stay.
Well, that's the lure from the old Patriots dynasty, isn't it? It's, do you want to go and make XYZ million playing in Cleveland or Jacksonville or Tennessee, naming three historically bad but not all bad teams at the moment? Or do you want to take veteran minimum but come and play with Tom Brady and for Bill Belichick and win 14 Super Bowls? You've got that lure with the Rams now, maybe more than you had with the Bucks last season, because yes, the Bucks might be more, or might have appeared on paper more stacked than the Rams. As we've seen, the Bucks' success potentially hinged on 42, 43, 44-year-old Tom Brady. He's one of those. Whereas with the Rams, you're kind of like, hey, do you want to come and play with a still relatively young in comparison Matthew Stafford, along with Cooper Kupp and probably OBJ?
Stafford's not the draw of Brady. They won the Super Bowl in spite of Stafford, not because of him. He threw, 2 picks? He
threw game-winning touchdowns in clutch moments.
But towards the end of the season, he wasn't.
So
I think the thing is, we're doing this ridiculous thing where we compare other human beings to Tom Brady against. Tom Brady is the ultimate draw. Matthew Stafford is a heck of a draw for a good wide receiver.
Yes.
Yeah. Sean McVay is the reason you go to LA, I think.
It's a combination of all of them. And
many reasons I'd go to LA, Rob. Sean McVay, not one of them.
From my mind, as I said to kind of you after we'd watched the trophy presentation and all of the interviews, you've got Aaron Donald there kind of in tears a little bit, trying to avoid the question about retirement and everything and just hugging his kids. And then they go to Matt Stafford, who seems incredibly composed, as if all they've done is they're not asking him, hey Matthew, how do you feel about winning the Super Bowl? They've just gone up to, hey Matthew, how do you feel about beating the Jets on Thursday Night Football? And part of me, I think, as I said to you guys, thinks Stafford's head was still processing, hang on a minute, you're telling me seasons can end like this? Because he's still in his head got that mindset of being a Detroit Lion and having to do all of it by himself. I think you give him another year or so in McVay's system with his coaching and we'll see a drastically different Matthew Stafford, sorry.
I think you'll say the same Matt Stafford. I'm going to call him Matt because he's called Matt.
Doesn't help photographers that fall off stage.
His wife had a jacket on at the parade that said it's Matthew, not Matt. So, use people's names if they want to.
It's all right. Yeah, to his pals though, we call him Matt.
Actually, we're on. This was going to be something a bit like, but let's do it now. Matthew Stafford. I don't mind calling him whatever he wants to be called. This Super Bowl win suddenly completely transforms the way you look at his career, doesn't it? His career has gone from the guy who had 4,000 yard passing seasons, the guy who had, statistically, was amongst the very best in the league, but had never won a playoff game. And all of a sudden, we said this, you have this reputation until you change it. He's gone from a quarterback who has never won a playoff game to a quarterback who has just won the Super Bowl. I mean, he's just rolled through all of those playoff games. And despite the fact you mentioned it, Phil, not always at his best, turns the ball over a bit, was carried for a couple of games by good players around him. I mean, he's now got the same number of Super Bowls as Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he has got more Super Bowls than many very, very good quarterbacks who never quite made it and never quite got over the hill. I mean, does this put Matthew Stafford one day in the Hall of Fame, do you think?
I'm not gonna go in on that. All I'm gonna make a point on here is saying, if Patrick Mahomes or Burrow or Justin Herbert or Josh Allen in the Super Bowl with the game on the line had thrown that no-look pass, it would be all anybody would be talking about for weeks. And the fact that everyone has kind of gone, yeah, that was really cool. Well done, Matthew Stafford, and just moved on is, to me, a little bit disrespectful.
Do you know what? I will agree. And I'm not, Matt, I didn't say he was a bad quarterback. I only said how much of an upgrade is he on Jared Goff, right? But I will agree with you. And the reason I agree with you on that no-look pass is some of Mahomes' no-look passes are because he could, because he has that ability and he has that vision. The no-look pass from Stafford was necessity because he needed to look defenders off because everybody's thinking the ball's going to Cooper. It was the necessity of being able to do that. And you said it earlier, Aldrin, then get it through that tiniest window because that's what it's going to take to get the ball to Cooper Kupp. I mean, I think that, if it's not played in slow motion under wildly dramatic music with Keith Sutherland voicing over in America's game, I'll be amazed because I think it was an utterly brilliant play that I think he should be remembered for, across a whole career. It's the kind of play people should talk about, like the Philly special, like the fake spike from the Dolphin. These are absolutely incredible plays in incredible moments. I'm with you. He deserves every bit of credit for it.
Funny that you brought up the Philly special because, of course, we haven't mentioned the Cincy special, have we? Where Boyd, and it wasn't Boyd, was it? Mixon throws the touchdown to Higgins.
Mixon, yeah.
But going back to your original question, for me, right now, Stafford's in the Hall of Very Good. I don't know. He's certainly not a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Do you not think? Kurt Warner's in, right? Kurt Warner's in.
I think
he's not
I think he goes. I think he does though, and I don't necessarily. And this doesn't mean that I believe. This doesn't mean that I believe he's a first ballot Hall of Famer based on his career. But I think you look at the history of how players such as him are perceived based on the number of yards that he's hit, the records he's achieved, and now the Super Bowl. Just because I think we're probably all in agreement, we probably wouldn't put him in as a first ballot Hall of Famer. But the question was, does he get in? And I think the answer is yes.
I think what has, and I love Kurt Warner. I mean, as a Cardinals fan, there are very few players held at that level in terms of my regard for them as professional football players. But what has Kurt Warner done that Matthew Stafford now hasn't?
So Super Bowl champion. So we cross those two off. But let's just do a comparison. NFL career highlights and awards for Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
NFL Comeback Player of the Year 2011, Pro Bowl 2014, Detroit Lions All-Time Team, and Best Comeback Athlete at the ESPY Awards 2011. Kurt Warner, Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, two-time NFL Most Valuable Player, Walter Payton, NFL Man of the Year, two-time first team All-Pro, 4 Pro Bowls, twice he's led the league in touchdowns, 3 times he's led the league in total completion percentage, twice he led the league in passer rating, once he led the year in passing yards.
One thing that I will raise you on that, where's Megatron? Megatron in the Hall of Fame? Was he a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Yes.
He played significantly less years, won significantly less things. and he was a no, not even under consideration that people were like, yeah, he's straight.
Let's not get hung up on stats and stuff for the Hall of Fame, because the fact that Rondé Barber still isn't in the Hall of Fame and he didn't get in this year is ridiculous. When you look at his
don't
stats,
worry. I'm sure if you all saw Richard Sherman's rant about Matthew Stafford and people getting mentioned about the Hall of Fame, I think people should go and...
The thing is, you're talking about Megatron. You're talking about a guy who has been in the discussion for the greatest receivers of all time. Consistently, no matter how bad the Lions were, everyone was like, this guy is a guy who is changing the league. Is Matthew Stafford in the conversation for greatest quarterbacks of all time?
But I think if you think that Megatron's in, who put him there with passing the ball? Wasn't anybody other than Matthew Stafford. So, I think, and this is and again, I'm not saying that I think Matthew Stafford should be, but I think he gets in. And I think if Megatron gets in, then he's got one less ring and played significantly less years. So I do think that you get a bit of a gimme for those detritus years of the Detroit Lions. So yeah, I think he probably makes it in.
So we've got a whole off-season to debate Matthew Stafford and also imagine who might and who might not get into the Hall of Fame. Before we round out our Super Bowl show, though, is it worth taking a bit of time to focus on the Bengals? I had Zach Taylor on the hot seat and mentioned him in one of our earlier pods this year as being the coach I thought would lose their job first this season. I mean, he has signed a multi-year, multi-million dollar deal in the last few days, so certainly that hasn't happened. It's a weird one because I'm one of those believers that you can't immediately say any team, even if they've got young talent on their roster, are automatically guaranteed to get back to the Super Bowl again, particularly not in the AFC. Actually, young talent is pretty commonplace among the big hitters in that conference. But what do we think of the season the Bengals had and how they go into next year with players ultimately just having developed at this, I don't know, stratospheric rate? Are they set up for long-term success with Taylor, with Burrow, with Chase, with Mixon, and so on and so on?
Yes.
No.
But they need to shore up their O-line. Burrow got sacked way too much in the playoffs. Well, probably the regular season as well, but the playoffs.
That is the reason why I say no.
Yeah.
Because you cannot have... No, I don't think they can. I think they had the chance this year and they didn't.
I disagree. You've already talked about how deep the offensive lineman class is in this year's draft. I think they can address it. And if they do, I'd put them as favourites to win the division next year.
No. I think the biggest weakness they have is that moment in the third or fourth quarter where Burrow gets hit and he's sat on the floor clutching his knee. And I think we all turned to each other and said, that's not good. And I think the problem is that their entire franchise hinges on keeping Joe Burrow healthy. And to my mind, they are shocking at that. And that's coming from a Colts fan in an era where we've wasted Andrew Luck's career from similar failings and we left it far too late to fully invest in that O-line. So that is why I think maybe no.
I'm in agreement with Aldrin here, and I think Aldrin speaks from experience, having seen a highly touted quarterback come out of college, look absolutely amazing, and then get broken by an offensive line that couldn't hold back paper. So, I think the Bengals are set up well for success, but solving that O-line has to be the thing they do. And we're talking about how we don't think that's possible because of, maybe they can't get it out of the draft or something like that. Go back 10, 15, 20 minutes of this very podcast where we're talking about Andrew Whitworth. That was a guy, admittedly, they got from the Bengals, but he was a guy that came in and really helped shore up that Rams offensive line, and they really started to perform better with that kind of influence there. If the Bengals can go out and get that piece, that missing piece to that success, then they're sorted out from there. yeah, like I'm kind of with Rob in kind of my assessment of Zach Taylor was that the best Zach Taylor was the Black Ranger from the first series of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and the
Nice
Zach
reference.
Taylor that the Zach Taylor that you didn't want was the head coach of the Bengals, and you kind of like again was it when the Bengals went for it on fourth down quite early on, didn't they?
Niche.
And we talked about like, are they going to kick the field goal or everything? And Rob pointed out as they showed Zach Taylor on the sidelines, like that is not a guy who's getting ready to kick it. And he was no hesitation, no doubt, it was literally, let's go for it. And I think that's kind of the coach that the Bengals have needed, especially coming off that kind of Marvin Lewis era of just, well, you know, they gave it their best shot, didn't they? Didn't they do well? No, they didn't.
There's a, like I said, I think you can only feel up on the Bengals. And we were talking about ways to make yourself a destination if, you know, you're trying to bring in free agent talent and so on. And I think the Bengals have absolutely flipped the switch when it comes to that. They are suddenly an AFC destination for free agents who want to be competitive and play with a great quarterback is often the draw, as we said. The big problem I have for really the Bengals is I think even if they have a great offseason, I think they're again only one of 5 or 6 really, really good teams. I mean, are the Bengals better than the Bills, better than the Chiefs, better than the Titans with a fit Derrick Henry? You know, what can the Chargers do? I mean, Herbert feels like a guy who's going to be leading that franchise for an awful long time. I just think there's no guarantee you ever get back there. A couple of years ago, we had, you know, Lamar Jackson being, you know, the savior of the NFL, you know, as the quarterback at the Baltimore Ravens, and things even look a lot more iffy for them. You know, as much as the AFC have won, you know, it's an NFC team have won the Super Bowl. I actually think the AFC feels like the stronger conference moving forward. I wouldn't put it past the Bengals, but I think they have to come back better next year than they were this year to remain relevant. I'm with you, Phil. I think they'll win the division. I think they'll make the playoffs, but there's going to be some good teams they come up against. And can you do what they've done this season again? Who knows? You know, who knows? I think it's a tall ask.
And then just before we round out the podcast then, I guess the one thing to call back is all of our brilliantly outlandish predictions from last week. And I think, Rob, you probably come closest / win because you said, well, I'm trying to think back to what you said, but I don't think you said not a starting quarterback. I think you said just somebody that wasn't the starting quarterback would throw a touchdown pass, and I think you actually nailed it.
I'd feel more bullish about my prediction if the Bengals had won. You know, if that felt like, you know, part of a game-winning kind of contribution, I think I'd be more bullish to say. But yeah, isn't it a pity that, you know, the mix and throw weirdly is, you know, there's so much in common with, you know, the Philly special and so on. But when you don't win those games, it just doesn't quite carry the same, I don't know, it doesn't become part of folklore, does it, for that fan base or for the NFL fans in general? But yeah, what a play. I mean, what a play to call. And, you know, I've been a little bit critical on this pod about second half play calls by Zach Taylor. That was brilliant. That was just absolutely what you stay up through the middle of the night and early morning to watch, isn't it, in a Super Bowl as a UK fan? So yeah, has it got a name yet? As Joe Mixon's, no, not going to get a tagline or a name.
You get a name if you don't win. I think it's just a good play, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good play.
Also, I enjoyed the failed Philly with Cooper Kupp massively overthrowing Matthew Stafford. Stafford just floundering and then looking at the cornerback, and they were like, "What are you doing over here?" Yeah, wasn't the one with Tom Brady in the Super Bowl? Was it against the Eagles or was it the Falcons? And it kind of had the same feel about it, didn't it? But yeah, good for the bet. I mean, Jamar Chase, what a season. Mixon, what a season. I mean, Eli Apple, I know he runs his map, but I mean, as he said, you know, a player who's been passed up so many times and I think has performed admirably. Yeah, I think there are things to like about the Bengals. I think they'll be in the mix.
And congratulations for them on being AFC champs in a very competitive conference. What a brilliant job that is. Gentlemen, next week, shall we get together and talk about which of the floundering teams from this season have immediately turned around their fortunes with the hire of a brilliant head coach, and who maybe hasn't? And maybe even talk more Super Bowl. Maybe there'll be even more stories come 7 days' time. But from our pod and another season of Top NFL Jibber Jabber, congratulations to the Rams of Los Angeles. Commiserations to the other 31 teams, headlined by the Cincinnati Bengals, who pushed them close. Any final thoughts as we wrap up our season's action?
What a great season overall, especially the playoffs is my overriding. Because every single playoff game, where the other team was in it, into the last minute of the game, and I cannot remember a season like that. So what a fantastic season of games.
Yeah,
Chiefs Bills might be the best game I've ever seen. That high, and that is
last year's Super Bowl, Rob, but
that was dull. It was one-sided.
It was one-sided and dull. Yeah, it was painful to watch, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. But yeah, Phil, I'll agree with that. Super takeaway. Owen.
I suppose the only other takeaway I think I would just offer the viewers is that if listeners on YouTube, if you are planning a Super Bowl party of your own next year, and if you have 5 people at that party, including yourself, you do not in any way need £150 worth of food and about £50 worth of American sweets. That is far too much. But it was really nice.
It looked great.
It did look great.
And that's what we're all about here on the Club Dub podcast.
Yeah,
thanks to Hickories for providing our pre and mid-game food.
For a hefty fee. You made it sound like we're sponsored. We're not. We shelled out a lot of money.
They want to sponsor us for next year's Super Bowl party, then get in touch.
Yeah, there's still some stuff in the freezer. We've still got that weird popcorny stuff. It'll be fine for a year's time. It'll keep, as they say. A brilliant Super Bowl party to end our season in your company, gentlemen. So yeah, that was great. Aldrin, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think it was brilliant. The playoffs were amazing. The Super Bowl, I thought, was great just because it was another of those games that under the 2-minute warning, any team could win, any team could lose, and it was all to play for on critical plays. So yeah, I couldn't be disappointed by any of it.
We chat about it every week because it truly is the greatest sport on earth. I don't think there is drama like it anywhere else. And your company has been a treat. So next week we start incredibly looking ahead to next season. Join us for that. We'll also do the Club Dub Podcast End of Season Awards. I'll be sending those around on WhatsApp to get your thoughts in advance of next week's show. So, a good couple of bits to get through. But gentlemen, thank you for your company and insight as always. Absolutely stellar show. Let's do it again in a week's time.
Thanks, Rob.
Cheers, Rob.
Thanks a lot.
This is amazing.
Remember to subscribe and be cool. Tell your friends.